Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast. I'm your host, Mo, and this week we're talking about creativity. And so, if you cannot tell, based on like the title of this podcast and kind of like some themes and similarities among all the podcasts up until this point, I am a very big fan of art and just the creative process in and of itself. I am an artist. I write, and I actually have um, some of my personal work. I've like recited some of the poems I've written on my personal TikTok. So follow me there if you like to. It's the LBLY Infinite, and I have also technically I am published. I had a poem published when I was younger in a school like a school book or something like that. And so that's also really, really cool. Um, but yes, I'm an artist. I've been writing since I was young and I write a lot now. I've not posted the the amount of work posted is probably like the smallest drop in the bucket of the things that I've written and the things that I write or desire to write. And so I kind of wanted to just use this episode to talk about the creative process and why I think creativity is important for everyone, really. And so I'm going to use two works of art to discuss that. So let's hop right into our first one. Alrighty, so for our first work of art, I want to talk about the documentary Indie Game, the movie. So if you want a spoiler-free watch of this documentary, feel free to pause, go check it out. This documentary was released in 2012 and it is an hour and 45 minutes long, but it's a really good documentary and I definitely recommend it. If you don't mind a few of the talking points being discussed in this episode, because I do not plan to talk about every single little detail, feel free to stick around. So in this documentary, we follow three different games and their game developers. The very first game and the primary game that we're kind of following in this documentary is that of Super Meat Boy, and the game developers for that are Edmund McMillan and Tommy Raffines. Also following the game developer of Fez, which is Spill Fish. And then we also are following the game developers of the game Braid, which is Jonathan Blow. Now these four game developers and their games are kind of like all of their stories are kind of interwoven throughout this documentary, and it's really, really cool. I like how we kind of get to see this game developing experience through three different perspectives. Because with Super Meat Boy, their game developers are actively in the process of releasing a game. And then, so we kind of see the mind frame and the thinking and the actions behind that. And then we also see that of Phil Fish, who is actively in the process of creating a game. And we kind of see the mind frame and the actions around that. And then we also see Jonathan Blow, who at this point has already released his indie game. And he's kind of reflecting on his experience upon having released that game. Really, really cool. Now, some of the things I really, really liked about these particular artists and the how this documentary kind of portrayed them was just how connected their art itself, so the games that they were making, were to them, how personal it was to them. Like you kind of hear all of them talking about how their relationship with games growing up is what influenced them to create the games that they're making and that they release. You see them talking about how like their love for games and how they grew up and their upbringing was really important to them, and it made them want to create an art. And so this kind of co-signs or aligns at least with the kind of philosophy I personally have, that like art is not just an imitation of life, but it is an extension of life itself, because we would not have this art made by these developers if they had not lived the life they lived. And so like this art that they made exists as an extension of them. And I think that's really, really cool. And it's also kind of why I feel like everybody should be creating things. I think everyone kind of deserves to create and enjoy the art that they make, even if they're the only ones kind of making it. So yeah, something that stood out to me personally as I watched this, of the four game developers, there was only one game developer, Tommy Raffines, one of the duo for Super Meat Boy, who kind of talked about how he did not actually care about what other people thought of his game. He cared more so about whether or not he put out a good game. And I think that's really important when it comes to life and when it comes to being an artist, that like you just kind of have to come to terms and understand that you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that there are going to be people who are unable to experience you the way you would like to be experienced, just as if you create an art, there are going to be people who are unable to experience your art in the way you would like for it to be experienced. All you should have to really worry about, or all you should kind of be concerned about, is whether or not you are putting out something you would be proud of. And I think that's all we can really ask for. Because like you kind of see in the documentary, like the other developers kind of stressing or being a bit anxious about what other people might think of the art that they're making, of the art that that's about to be released. And you kind of see how it's like it messes with them, I'd say. Like they're kind of like definitely like obviously a bit rattled around like the possibility of poor performance. And I just thought like Tommy really kind of stood out in that, like, while you do see him rattled like in the documentary, it's about whether or not the game is going to be good, or the game is going to like actually do all the things that they want the game to do. And I think that's really admirable, because this kind of talking point, actually, you can kind of see it referenced also in Jonathan Blow and some of his reflections around his game Braid. You can kind of see some of the things that upset Jonathan a bit when it came to the release of Braid, and that like he was a bit upset by like people not interpreting the art that he made in the way that he was hoping it was made. Like he was hoping the story kind of was seen or a very specific way, and was kind of upset when it wasn't like introduced or like seen in that way. And so I think it makes sense for you to be upset about something like that, but also the art you make isn't going to be experienced the exact same way by everyone who sees it. And so yeah, I actually kind of do also want to talk a bit more about some of the other cool things around why I kind of feel like art is an extension of life, and why that kind of philosophy is really important to me. And I'm going to use our next work of art to discuss it. So see you there. Alrighty, and so with our second work of art, we're going to be talking about the documentary series on Netflix called Abstract, The Art of Design. And so this is a documentary series that kind of follows, where each episode follows a different artist. And so I won't be talking about all of the episodes. I'm only going to talk about one. And so I highly recommend this series though, because I find it really, really cool to like kind of get to see the ins and outs and the ways kind of in which people like want to create, and how they decide to come about the creations and the things that they do. Like there's photography, there's ones like there's even footwear, there's fashion. There's so many different artists who talk about their work and their inspirations and why they do the work that they do, and it's really, really cool. And so I highly recommend it. The artist in particular, or that I want to talk about, is Oliver Eliasson. And so this is a Icelandic and Danish artist who makes immersive, like really immersive work. And so his episode is season 2, episode 1. So if you want a spoiler free watch, the episode is only like 45 minutes. And so you feel free to pause here, go over, watch it, and come back. I'm not going to talk about every single little detail in the episode, just the things that I thought were really cool and I really, really enjoyed. And I think that would matter, or kind of add to the conversation I'm wanting to have with this episode. Oliver Eliasson, this Icelandic Danish artist, something I really liked about his episode, and this episode in particular, is like his emphasis on the details. So he talks about how with his work, he likes to pay attention to the details and to all the small things that people often miss on their day to day. And they're not able to even kind of like conceptualize, because they're not allowed that time or given the space to pay attention, really. He talks about just how important humanity itself is to art, and how like the art that he creates, he feels that wouldn't exist without that of the audience. And I think that's a really, really cool perspective, because like in some of even in some of his works, I feel like his art kind of reflects a philosophy that I also kind of really like and admire, in that like all of your art is going to be interpreted in different ways, because it's going to be based on the interpretation of the person experiencing that art. And so for example, with him, one of the cool projects he talks about specifically that I found fascinating was like his very first one, in which for his very first exhibit, he wanted to capture a rainbow. And so he got just about all the things that he would need to capture a rainbow. So you need water, you need light, and you also need the active participant. And so he was very intentional about making an exhibit that would sort of capture this. And because he did that, this exhibit looked different to everyone because not everyone see the exhibit at the same in the same way. And so I thought it was really cool that like he was rather intentional about not just the way his art came across, but about how his art was experienced, and acknowledging and being willing to accept that his art is going to look different and be different and feel different for all those who kind of experience it, and being okay with that, because that's kind of just the reality of life as well. It's like we're not going to be experienced the same by everyone. We're not going to be experienced how we would want to be experienced by everyone, but we kind of do just have to be okay with existing how we exist and living how we are living, and not letting what it is other people might think affect how we move and how we are going about the work that we're doing. And so like kind of a lot similar to Tommy Rafine's in our very first section, in that like care about the product and care about providing a good experience, but you cannot guarantee or gauge or force people to experience your work in a very specific way, because they're going to see things through the lens in which they experience their life, and that's going to look different for them. So that's going to apply to any art you make, that's going to apply to you as a person. And so all you have to can do is make sure you are creating work that you are proud of. And yeah, and I hope to kind of delve into this a bit more in our next section. Alrighty, so given kind of what we've already discussed, I think it is really, really important and really, really cool actually that we get to kind of embrace and enjoy all that is around us, and that we ourselves create, if at all possible. If even if not possible, create for the sake of creating, even if you're the only one who sees it. I think it is important that we all kind of express ourselves, even if it's only in the ways we know how, and even if it's like not seen by the public. I believe everyone should create. I think it's a great release, even just like therapeutically, but also it's a great way for you to just be. Honestly, I feel like at people's core, they kind of just want to do stuff and make stuff and create stuff, but we're often not given the time or allowed the space to create, because we're like we've kind of come to see art and artistry as a product and as something to be sold, and not something to do for just for the sake of creating. And I think it is time we get rid of that narrative, and we create just for the sake of creating. We do not have to sell everything we create. We can create just because we want to create, and we do not have to be the best of the best to even create. Like if you want to draw and all you can draw is stick figures, draw your story with stick figures. It is okay. And if you want to kind of pursue and get better at it, feel free to kind of pursue and get better at that. But even if all you can do is stick figures, make your story, tell your story with stick figures, and enjoy it. Stick figures can be fun. Like there are games made with stick figures. There used to be, like, I know growing up, you used to get the sticky notes, and people would make like little, like almost like animations with the sticky notes by drawing stick figures. So it's like there are things to do, there are things to create, things to enjoy just by creating that, even if that's all you can do. I think it's really important we get rid of the narrative that like only certain people are allowed to create. Like you have to be of a certain skill level, you have to be of a certain, I guess, celebrity level or thing of that nature. Just create for the sake of creating. It's therapeutic. It's beneficial to you mentally, and could potentially even be beneficial physically, depending on what type of art it is you want to create. Because dancing is also an art, and there's lots of things that are also art that are done physically. Something that I really, really enjoyed. There's a quote that Olafur Eliasson had mentioned in his episode on the documentary series that reads, "Art is the world's ability to have an intimate relationship with itself." And kind of just like how I was talking about previously, like I think it is so important that we create for the sake of creating, because we deserve to have that intimate relationship with ourselves. We like art is also a way we can kind of get to know ourselves even deeper and even further. And we deserve that. We deserve to know who we are, how we came to be, and what it is that kind of makes us tick. It's really powerful to know those things about us. And oftentimes we're in such a rush, we're in such a almost like this culture of like getting like this hustle culture that like we are denied the time and the space to get to know ourselves, to enjoy the little things, to be able to like see what it is we might enjoy. And I want us to do what we can to kind of just try to break out of that. Another cool quote actually that was mentioned by Oliver is by the German painter Gerhard Richter, and it reads, art is the highest form of hope. I think it's really, really important that art is embraced, art is seen as hope, especially with art kind of, at least for me, and maybe for others, art being seen as an extension of life. I feel like it might be really important that we also see art as that highest form of hope, in turn kind of making it so that life itself is the highest form of hope. And I think, especially if you consider the time that we live in now, that it is important that we kind of continue to embrace and continue to hope for a better future so that we can have a better life. And oftentimes, for a lot of people, being seen or just being able to express yourself in the way that you feel you want to express yourself is important, and it is enough to kind of keep them going. And so that's why I kind of also encourage people to make art, and even if you don't show anyone. And kind of if we want to piggyback to like what I was talking about in our act one when, with Jonathan Braid, the game developer, Jonathan Blow, the game developer for Braid, and how he was kind of talking about his fear of things being misconstrued or misinterpreted because like people weren't seeing the story that he in the way that he kind of wanted it to be seen. I think when it comes to art, just as when it comes to being a person, we have got to kind of come to embrace that we are not going to be seen in the very specific way we might want to be seen, and that's going to be okay. But also, there are going to be those who do see things in that very specific way that you also see those things. Because let's be real, there are billions of people on this planet, and so there's bound to be at least a few people who see things the exact way you see them, and they get to see themselves in your art. So if you're afraid of posting your art, if you're afraid of what like you feel people might think about the art you make, and about your art possibly not resonating with anyone, remember, there are billions of people on this planet, so there's bound to be at least a few people who will really resonate with your art, and those few people matter. And even if you post your art and all that you see really engaging or interacting with your art is you yourself, guess what? Your art still matters, because you as a person matter. And it's important to keep that in mind. Like, your art isn't only for other people, your art is for yourself. So kind of think about things and be a bit more like Tommy, one of the game developers for Super Meat Boy. You want to make a good product because you want to enjoy that product. You don't have to make your art for other people. You want to enjoy the art you make, so you make the art that you make. And that's kind of just how I feel and what I think is really important. So I think kind of going forward, we should just embrace creativity, embrace art, embrace hope, and learn to look at the small things. Because maybe too, creativity could be an art, and art like everything else. So last and certainly not least is this week's All Moment. So for this week's All Moment, I actually found a book recently that I've been really, really enjoying. This book is called The Design of Everyday Things, and it is by Don Norman. And so this book, while yes, I am still in the beginning, I'm going to be honest with you, but so from what I've read, it's been really good, and I've really been enjoying learning more. So this is kind of just talking about the psychology around what it is to like engineer and create the things that people kind of create on the daily. And I think that's really, really cool, and something that's just I find fascinating in general, because it kind of gets you to look at things in a different way. And I think being able to look at things in a different way is something that can kind of help and encourage your creativity. And I think that's actually really, really important. And also something that like being able to look and pay attention to the small things would kind of help and encourage. So I highly recommend this book, even though yes, I am still in the beginning. Like I'm still in the first chapter, but they're in the, right now where they're talking about like human engineering. So like I did literally just start this book this week, but it's a great book, and so I really wanted to talk about it from what I've read already. Because honestly, personally, I am really into psychology, and so to see something, because as you can also see, I'm really into art, and so to see something that kind of discusses design and psychology, it was like, oh, cool, best of both worlds almost. And so yeah, I highly recommend this book. Now, that is all I have for this week's episode. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or any topics you'd like to see me cover, drop them in the comments below. Feel free to follow me on social media. If you'd like to follow and keep up with the channel and any other cool updates and things that we do, follow Art Like Studios on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you'd like to follow me personally, feel free to follow my personal TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at The Lovely Infinite. So TheLVly Infinite. Yeah, it's on the screen. Um, yes, that's all I have for you today. Feel free to like, subscribe, follow for more. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.